Good evening, friends. This is Santa Claus coming to you on January 22, 2026, with today's news from around our beautiful, though sometimes troubled, world. Today marks some interesting historical anniversaries. In 1517, the Ottoman Empire captured Egypt, and in 1957, Israel withdrew from the Sinai Peninsula. History teaches us that borders and powers may shift, but our shared humanity remains constant. Speaking of shifting powers, the Trump administration appears to be actively seeking regime change in Cuba by year's end, emboldened by recent events in Venezuela. My heart is heavy thinking about the 32 Cuban soldiers who lost their lives during the operation that captured President Maduro. In times of political turmoil, let us remember that behind every policy decision are real human lives, mothers, fathers, children, all precious in the eyes of the Lord. Now, turning our gaze northward, President Trump has announced a framework of a future deal on Greenland with NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte. The president has withdrawn threatened tariffs against European nations while reiterating his desire to acquire this Arctic island, though Denmark and Greenland continue to maintain it is not for sale. Let us pray for peaceful negotiations that respect the wishes of all people involved. Meanwhile, across the globe, tensions remain high between China and Taiwan, with reports of Chinese spy networks infiltrating Taiwan's military. A sergeant in debt found himself entangled in espionage, revealing how personal hardship can sometimes lead good people down difficult paths. We must remember to support one another in times of need, so desperation doesn't drive our neighbors to desperate choices. In European waters, the French Navy has intercepted an oil tanker from Russia, targeting what's being called the Shadow Fleet, circumventing sanctions. The vessel, aptly named the Grinch, reminds us that even in serious matters, a touch of irony can be found. On a more hopeful note, Venezuela appears to be considering oil reforms that would allow foreign companies to participate in their industry once again. After years of hardship for the Venezuelan people, perhaps this represents a new chapter of prosperity that might benefit families who have struggled for too long. In Mexico, President Sheinbaum has reassured her nation after concerns about U.S. military movements near Mexican airspace. The good news is that communication prevailed, with written assurances provided to respect Mexico's sovereignty. President Trump met with Ukrainian President Zelenskiy in Davos, saying simply that the war has to end. After nearly 4 years of conflict, bringing such suffering to innocent families, how my heart yearns for peace in Ukraine. Let us hope these talks bear fruit and bring comfort to those who have endured so much. The president has also proposed a board of peace with global scope, inviting various nations to join. While some experts express concern about the structure, we should always encourage any sincere effort toward peaceful resolution of conflicts. In Spain, my friends, I must report troubling news of a fourth train accident in a week, with 6 people suffering injuries when a crane arm struck a commuter train. This follows a tragic high-speed collision that took 43 precious lives days earlier. Let us keep those affected in our hearts and prayers. Trade dispute has emerged between Colombia and Ecuador, with electricity sales suspended and tariffs imposed. As neighbors, we achieve so much more through cooperation than conflict, a lesson for nations as much as for individuals in our communities. In Syria, the government has retaken areas previously held by Kurdish forces, consolidating central authority after years of civil war. The shifting circumstances highlight the complex nature of peace building in regions with deep historical division. The situation in Iran remains concerning, with protests continuing and thousands reportedly killed in government crackdowns. President Trump is considering various options, though analysts suggest that improving internet access might help protesters more than military intervention. How important it is to remember that peaceful paths forward, whenever possible, prevent further suffering. Finally, my heart is particularly heavy hearing that the UN World Food Programme warns of a catastrophic hunger crisis in Nigeria. More than 1 million people could lose access to emergency food aid within weeks unless funding is secured. The agency will have to scale back assistance dramatically, even as 35 million people face severe hunger this year, the highest number on the continent. As we close today's news, I remind you that wherever there is hunger, wherever there is conflict, wherever there is hardship, we all have the opportunity to help in some way. Perhaps through donations to hunger relief, perhaps through prayers for peace, or simply by showing kindness to someone in need in your own community. Remember, my dear friends, that hope is like the light that shines in darkness, and the darkness has never overcome it. This is Santa Claus, wishing you a blessed evening filled with love for one another.